For generations, we've been told a very neat, tidy story about human progress. But what if that story is completely backward? What if the rise of civilization wasn't our greatest achievement, but a trap we fell into out of desperation? That's the huge question we're tackling today.
Okay, so you know the story we all learned in school. It goes something like this. For ages, we were primitive hunter-gatherers, just barely scraping by. Then, one day, we had a light bulb moment. Farming. This, the story goes, gave us a steady food supply, which led to settlements, which led to, well, everything else. A straight line of progress. But here's the thing. When archaeologists actually look at the bones, they tell a completely different story. Hunter-gatherers, they were taller, healthier, and ate a much better diet. The first farmers, on the other hand, well, they were shorter, they were malnourished, they worked way harder, and because they were all packed together, they were constantly sick. By almost every single physical measure, it was a terrible, terrible deal.
And that right there is the central puzzle. If agriculture made life so much worse, why in the world did we do it? The answer, as we're about to see, isn't a story about brilliant invention. It's a story of global catastrophe, desperate refugees, and the loss of our most basic freedoms.
To really get why the trap closed on us, we have to first understand the world we lost. And it wasn't some brutish, primitive era. It was an age of incredible social flexibility and, most importantly, freedom. Anthropologists David Graeber and David Wengrow argue that for tens of thousands of years, human life was built on three fundamental freedoms. First, the freedom to just get up and move away if you didn't like how things were going. Second, the freedom to disobey orders. And third, the freedom to completely change your society, to create new rules. This flexibility was just normal.
And we have to get this idea out of our heads that these were simple, ignorant people. They weren't. They had a sophisticated science of their own. They understood the cosmos so well that they built these massive, mind-boggling structures like Göbekli Tepe and aligned them perfectly with the stars. This was a world of deep thought and constant social experimentation. In fact, we know for a fact that people knew how to farm long before they actually did it. Take the Natufians, about 15,000 years ago. They knew how to grow grains, they were baking bread, maybe even brewing beer. But, and this is the key, they didn't rely on it. It was more like a hobby, a side project. Why? Because hunting and gathering was just a better, easier way to live. They understood something profound that we later forgot. As Yuval Noah Harari famously said, we did not domesticate wheat. Wheat domesticated us. You see, a full commitment to farming meant you became a slave to your crops, to the seasons, to backbreaking labor. And for what? A worse diet? It was a trap. And for millennia, our ancestors were smart enough and free enough to just walk around it. So what changed? If we were so good at avoiding this trap, what finally pushed us in? Well, the first part of the answer quite literally fell out of the sky.
The world was warming up nicely after the last ice age. Things were good for hunter-gatherers. But then, around 12,800 years ago, bam, something happens that plunges the entire planet back into a deep, 1,000-year-long freeze. Geologists call it the Younger Dryas.
And the evidence is pointing to a massive cosmic impact, a comet or asteroid fragment. Across the globe, scientists find this thin layer of melted glass, nanodiamonds, and platinum spikes, all telltale signs of an extraterrestrial impact. It triggered continent-spanning wildfires and a sudden, brutal, impact winter that just decimated the planet's ecosystems.
And we can see the result in the dirt. At a site in Syria called Abu Huraira, there's a clear burn layer from this exact time. Before the burn, the people there were happily foraging for wild plants. Immediately after, they start cultivating basic cereals. Agriculture wasn't a choice anymore. It was a desperate act of survival because their world had been destroyed. Eventually, the world recovered from that impact winter. But just as things were getting back to normal, a second, much slower catastrophe began. One that would take away humanity's single most important freedom, the freedom to just walk away. You see, for tens of thousands of years, the Persian Gulf wasn't a body of water. It was a massive, fertile river valley, about the size of Great Britain. Think of it as this incredible oasis, a perfect refuge for humans during the coldest parts of the Ice Age. But as the planet kept warming, the ice caps kept melting, and the sea levels kept rising. Then, around 8,000 years ago, the water reached a tipping point. The Indian Ocean smashed through the Strait of Hormuz, creating what must have been the single largest waterfall in world history, and it started to pour into that low-lying oasis.
This great drowning created a refugee crisis on a scale we can barely imagine. And here's the smoking gun. Right at this exact moment in history, more than 60 sophisticated towns and villages suddenly pop into existence out of nowhere along the new coastlines of Mesopotamia. They show up fully formed with stone architecture, domesticated animals, complex trade. It's clear they weren't locals, they were the survivors of that flood.
So now you have this massive population of refugees, all squeezed into the few habitable lands left. And in this new, crowded reality, those ancient freedoms, they just weren't possible anymore. So here's how the trap finally slammed shut. Step 1, catastrophes create refugees. Step 2, those refugees get squeezed together. Step 3, and this is the big one, the freedom to move away is gone. There's nowhere left to go. Step 4, now you have to farm because you can't feed that many people in one place by foraging. And finally, step 5. The people who organize all this, the leaders who manage the grain, they don't go away after the crisis is over. They become a permanent elite. The very idea of leadership changed. Before the trap, leaders were temporary, charismatic figures, shamans who people followed because they were inspiring. After the trap, you get a permanent class of managers, of bureaucrats. Their power isn't based on inspiration, it's based on their control of the food. Hierarchy wasn't an idea we came up with. It was a solution to a crisis.
And that was it. That was the final turn of the key in the lock. For thousands and thousands of years, the ultimate check on anybody's power was the ability to just vote with your fate and leave. And now, that was gone. People had to accept being told what to do, because the alternative was starvation. The trap was closed. So let's put this all together with a final analogy that I think completely reframes the entire story of humanity. Our history isn't a story about climbing a ladder, getting better and better with each step. It's a story about surviving in a lifeboat after the ship went down. Just think about it. On the original ship, that free pre-catastrophe world, you could go wherever you wanted. But on the crowded lifeboat, that's post-flood Mesopotamia, you're stuck in your spot. The freedom to move is gone. On the ship, you could help yourself to food. In the lifeboat, you have to obey the captain, the new elite who rations out the grain. All those old freedoms became luxuries the survivors simply could not afford. So in the end, civilization wasn't some grand cruise ship we designed and built. It was the cramped, crowded, difficult lifeboat we were all forced onto. We survived, and that is absolutely an accomplishment. But it leaves us with this huge, haunting question that echoes all the way to today. What did we lose to get here?